We're inside one of Jerusalem's most beautiful buildings, the Palestine Archaeological Museum. This is one of the great structures of the last period of our series, the final era before the creation of the State of Israel. The museum opened in the late 1930s during the time of the British Mandate to serve as a gallery for antiquities and as a workplace for the scholarly heroes of the time, the archaeologists who were busy uncovering the ancient history of the Holy Land. 2 decades before the museum opened, in December 1917, General Edmund Allenby captured Jerusalem at the head of a British army. To symbolize his respect for the city, he dismounted before crossing through the Jaffa Gate. When the British took Palestine from the defeated Ottoman Turks, they didn't treat the land as a colony. Rather, Britain was granted a mandate by the League of Nations to administer the territory, where a Jewish national home was to come into existence. So, for a period of 3 decades, this became British Mandate Palestine. This was no ordinary military occupation. Within a year of the conquest, a remarkable organization called the Pro-Jerusalem Society was established. This was a council dedicated to the welfare and development of the city, bringing together prominent cultural and political figures, British officials with local Muslims, Christians, and Jews. The decades that followed, the 1920s and 1930s, were a golden age for the city's architecture. Jerusalem was modernized and replanned, with new public buildings that sought to combine Western design with Oriental style. This is when the construction of the Palestine Archaeological Museum began. The architect, Austin Harrison, was British, born in Kent, and a distant relative of the novelist Jane Austen, for whom he was named. The building he proposed embodied a kind of Middle Eastern modernism, a blend of simple architectural forms with details rooted in local traditions. In keeping with a rule that the British legislated for aesthetic purposes, everything was built from the local Jerusalem limestone. The small domed ceilings found in nearly every room of the museum were constructed using traditional Arab techniques, not the Roman or later European methods, but those of the local builders passed down here over generations. Against the stark walls of the building, we see a vibrant fountain clad in Armenian tiles. This was one of the first major projects by the Armenian ceramic master David Ohanessian, who brought his craft to Jerusalem after his family, like many Armenian Christians, were forced out of their homes in Muslim Turkey by violence and expulsions. In a classic Jerusalem twist, workers building the Archaeological Museum unwittingly became archaeologists themselves when their shovels uncovered a number of ancient tombs from the 5th century BCE. Archaeological excavations and new construction went on simultaneously at the site until, predictably, the government ran out of money. To complete the project, the Department of Antiquities needed a donor. They turned to the New York tycoon John D. Rockefeller Jr. When the American came through with the missing funds, the edifice became known as the Rockefeller Museum, which is how it's known today. When it opened, the museum was overseen by a special scientific committee composed of representatives from the British Museum, the British Library, the newly established Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and scholars from Arab countries. It was to be not a local museum, but an international institution of global stature. The trilingual inscriptions seen throughout the museum, in English, Arabic, and Hebrew, appear in special typefaces that were created specifically for this building by the celebrated British designer Eric Gill, who also crafted the 10 stone reliefs adorning the museum. These depict 10 historical periods or civilizations whose remains might be uncovered during excavations in Palestine and subsequently studied and displayed here. Then came 1948, the year of Israel's independence. The British left amid a war between Arabs and Jews, and the city was divided between the new state of Israel and the Arab kingdom of Transjordan. The Rockefeller Museum and its collection fell within the Jordanian sector, and Jordan's Department of Antiquities took over. 19 years later, in 1967, the Six-Day War erupted, and now East Jerusalem was captured by Israel, along with the museum. The Israel Antiquities Authority moved in and stayed until moving to more modern quarters in 2024. Much of the museum remains preserved exactly as it was in 1948. It's essentially a museum of a museum, equipped with the most cutting-edge features of the late 1940s: cork floors, elegant wooden display cases, and explanatory labels in 3 languages. But of course, time couldn't really stand still. While nothing was ever added to the collection, some items were removed. For instance, after 1967, pieces of the Dead Sea Scrolls that were held here were transferred to the main campus of the Israel Museum and placed in a building called the Shrine of the Book, which was specially designed for their preservation and display. Still, as we walk through these halls, we get a vivid sense of archaeology as it was practiced here nearly a century ago. There are extraordinary finds from local excavations, including major discoveries from a dig conducted by Kathleen Kenyon, a famous British archaeologist, at Jericho, dating to the Neolithic and Bronze Ages. Of particular importance are these Neolithic plastered skulls with eyes of inlaid shells. The interior of the Islamic Winter Palace at Jericho, known as Hisham's Palace, is also displayed here. There are reliefs that once adorned the entrance to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, intricately carved wooden beams from the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and much else. Archaeologists and historians congregated here in the halls and courtyards, drawn by the museum's artifacts and modern library. Scholars like Fathers Vincent and Abel, Dominican clergymen who in the 1920s compiled the definitive history of the city in Roman and Byzantine times, Jerusalem Nouvelle, a work still in use 100 years later. Famous Israeli archaeologists like Michaela Viona, Nachman Avigad, and Yigael Yadin also worked here. Jerusalem isn't just a city of stones, but of extraordinary individuals who spent their lives with those stones, piecing together our history, passing on their insights and arguments to the next generation of scholars. When you sit here at the Rockefeller Museum, you can almost feel their presence, flipping through a volume in Latin or a new report of a recent dig, peering at the display cases, arguing about a fine point of Roman imperial architecture or fortifications in the time of Solomon, divided in their interpretations, but joined in their belief that the city's past is not just past, but a living force in the present and future of Jerusalem.